I think we're on.
Yes.
Webinar is now being streamed. Yes?
Before we start, either Joe or is Manuel still on here? Manuel, can you guys make me a co-host so I can let staff in?
You good?
No, I'm not a co-host yet.
Okay, so for the members of the public who might be watching this as we go live, we've had some technical difficulties this evening. It's taken us about a half an hour to straighten them out. We are in the final throes of being able to start the meeting, so bear with us. Let me know, Jamie Ray, when you're good.
Okay, I am good.
You're on?
I am.
Okay, terrific. So I think we can go ahead. At 5:28, I will call the November 3rd meeting of the Quality of Life Committee to order, and if we could get a roll call.
Councilor Cassett,
Here.
Councilor Villarreal,
Present.
Councilor Garcia,
Present.
Councilor Rivera,
Here.
and Chair Councilwoman Romero Worth.
I am here as well.
You have a
All
quorum.
right. So we have at least one change to the agenda, item 8B, the presentation on early childhood care in Santa Fe. We will be taking off tonight, and we will push that to a future meeting. And then are there other changes from staff and or from the committee?
Madam Chair, quick question on the
Yes.
agenda. Just
Yes,
because
Tom.
I did hear there was some changes, and the agenda that had been published for at least over the weekend was kind of wonky in the sense that the task force resolution was item 4A, which I'm now seeing as item 4C or 6C. So we're going off of the version that says 6C, correct? For the task force.
Yeah, so that was not the issue. That has always been on the agenda as far as I know. The issue was there was the Santa Fe Recovery Center. There was an item about the Santa Fe Recovery Center. It was inadvertently added to the agenda. I'm not sure when, over the weekend, early in the week, and it is not, the item is not ready until our December meeting. And so it was taken off. So if anybody saw that item, we're removing it tonight. That's the change.
Okay, but it still didn't address the kind of the agenda, like I said, that I had been working off of this for the past couple of days. There's not a 4A, which now has a 6C, which wasn't in the prior agenda, at least the one I was working off the past couple of days. 6C is the extend the community health and safety task force. Just to make sure that way the public's following along with the new, if they're not
Yeah,
seeing
that is the agenda we have in front of us tonight.
Okay, great. So wanted to confirm.
Okay. Other changes? If not, is there a motion?
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
We got a roll call. We have a motion and a second for approval of the agenda as amended.
Councilwoman Cassett,
Yes.
Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
Councilor Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Rivera,
Yes.
and Chair Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. We don't have, well, no, I guess we do. Approval of the consent agenda. Are there items on the consent agenda? Well, first of all, are there changes to the consent agenda from the staff or from the committee? And if not, are there items the committee would like to discuss?
Madam Chair, the Community Development Department has no changes for you.
Okay. Councilwoman Cassett, I think, are you flagging me down.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know why sometimes I switch between the virtual and the real hand. I would like to pull item C, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
so we are pulling item 6C. Anything else? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second, anybody?
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Councilwoman Cassett, a second from Councilor Rivera to approve the consent agenda as amended. If we could get a roll call on that, please.
Councilwoman Cassett,
Yes.
Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
Councilor Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Rivera,
Yes.
and Chair Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, then finally, one more approval of the October 20th minutes of this committee. Are there changes from the staff or the committee? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For item B in the minutes, the legislative priorities resolution, it was not voted on as presented the way it says in the notes in the minutes.
Okay,
It was pulled for discussion and then amendments. I presented amendments and then we voted on that item as amended.
right.
So that should be the correction. Does that have to come back to us next meeting or we can make amendments now?
I think you can do what you just did, which is to say what it should say. And then that is what we would be. Jesse, do you want to guide us on this? Do you know?
Madam Chair, Counselor, you can make the amendments and those will be then incorporated later. So this doesn't need to come back.
Thank you. All right. So are we clear about what we're changing in these minutes?
Jamie Ray, did you need me to repeat that?
No, I got that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there a motion to approve
Move to approve as
as
amended.
amended? Yeah, and a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the October 20th meeting minutes as amended. If we could get a roll call.
Councilwoman Cassett,
Yes.
Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
Councilor Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Rivera,
Yes.
and Chair Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. All right, now we are on to item 6C, which was pulled from consent. It's a resolution sponsored by Councilor Rivera, Councilwoman Villarreal, a resolution updating the terms of resolution number 2021-17 to extend the Community Health and Safety Task Force term through the end of the calendar year 2022. And Councilwoman Cassett, you pulled this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also wanted to follow up a bit on our conversation that we had in finance. I was able to see the update to the resolution, but I think better understanding the work that's been done and then the proposal for how the work is moving forward would be really helpful for me in terms of looking at the extension and the conversation about, what's been kind of some of the conversation that I know I've heard from the chairs of the committee, some of the challenges that because of our COVID life have come and with lack of staff. And so I guess I would like to, I don't know if it's possible to get the presentation, but to have this conversation more in context of what's happened and where the proposal is to be going. And whether there are other pieces of the structure that we need to be looking at to make sure that the work is happening in a way that is suited to our current conditions. Does that make all sense? No. I guess my request is still that I prefer to see the presentation and then bring this back to committee to have discussions during committee. Looking at this and really discussing how this work is planning on moving forward during the committee process as opposed to during the governing body process. And I guess without seeing the presentation, I don't want to be like working on this on the if there's something to work on the fly in governing body. I would rather be doing that work in committee and being able to pass it easily in governing body. Am I now making more sense?
So I think, yeah, what you had recommended that we do in finance is hear the presentation first and then bring this through. So, and I don't know where we are. Do we have the or is the presentation going to be scheduled at the November city council meeting? Because we weren't sure on Monday. I'm seeing a yes, shaking
Yeah,
his head.
I think that's been requested that we have the presentation. I sent an email to Christine that it be on the agenda for the November 10th meeting.
Okay, and then I think as we talked about in finance and what Councilwoman Cassett's talking about is that there would still be time after that for it to come back to quality of life, and then we would actually act on the resolution in the December meeting.
I think it could go multiple different ways. So I think it could go the way Councilwoman Cassett envisions it, or it could be heard all on one night. And if there are a significant amount of questions, then we can put it back through the committee process. I'm confident that after hearing the presentation and looking at the resolution that it'll make a lot more sense then. And we really wanted to present them both together so that you hear the presentation and then understand where we're moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly it. And I think that that's the hard part here is being asked to vote on this in committee. And as you said, the presentation will help make it more sense, help things. Why can't I talk today? I'm so sorry. I'm really tired today, everybody. The presentation will help, clarify how we are moving forward. And so I think that's why I'm struggling with voting on this in the committees, because the presentation hasn't occurred. And so it feels a little bit nebulous that I don't quite know exactly what I'm voting for. And so that's where my concern has come from mostly, is just wanting that additional information that my understanding is coming from the presentation.
Yeah, and I think that's why the decision, sorry, Madam Chair, that's why the decision to move forward without a recommendation came at finances, that might be a concern. But if there are a significant amount of questions or concerns after the presentation, then that recommendation could always be made that, we go back through the process and then hear it in December. And again, that was my sort of recommendation to the committee, is that's the way we proceed. It made sense in my mind, so that's the way I thought we should go. But it could end up coming back, I guess. So.
Okay, I mean, and I'm fine with that. I just didn't want to get to a place where, it makes it all the way through committee, we get to governing body, and then there's questions, and then, perhaps I request to send it back to committee without understanding, well, we sent it all the way through committee. So I am fine with that if that's, the understanding of especially the two of you who are doing the challenging work of trying to figure out how to make this cohesive and productive. And I know there's been a number of challenges. So I think that was my bigger concern, is I didn't want it to get to governing body. And then if there were questions after the presentation and request to send back to the committee process, that understanding that's why I didn't just pass it on consent at this time.
Yeah, and the reason to really extend is really to continue with the community engagement piece. And again, I think the presentation is going to focus on that specifically. So I think it'll demonstrate the importance of the community engagement, which I think we've all mentioned before, and give an outlined plan or detail of how we plan to move forward.
Wonderful. Perfect. Yes, that's very much what I am hoping to get more information on. So I do look forward to seeing that presentation. I will go ahead and yield the floor.
Okay, other questions on this?
Madam Chair, so just so I understand, so the goal would be to postpone this until our next quality of life meeting, or are you saying to pass this through to go on to governing body for
So
next
the
week?
thing, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so we passed it at finance without recommendation. So no matter what we do here, it's still going to governing body under our current rules. So there's no way to hold it here. But it sounds like we have the option to, that there's an understanding that we could get to governing body, we'll hear the presentation, and maybe we'll want to have more conversation and not act on the resolution at governing body. So it would come back through the committees or a committee or two, whatever, and then come back for action in December. If counselors aren't comfortable passing it after they hear the presentation in November, on November 10th. Jesse, you have your hand up to help us.
Thank you, Madam Chair and councilors. I believe that the procedural rules state that in order to get on the governing body agenda, it has to be approved by one committee. So the no recommendation at finance does not count as an approval. So at this point, if it either is denied here, postponed, or no recommendation here, it won't be on next week's agenda.
Okay, well, there's a wrinkle. Well,
Madam Chair, as long as we stay consistent again with that moving forward, I've seen items that were moved on without a recommendation that weren't approved by any of the committees that were then heard at council. So as long as we're going to stay consistent, that's fine.
yeah, I'm writing a note because I still think we passed it, right? We just passed it without recommendation. So yeah, I'm writing a note to get, and of course we don't have the city attorney's office here. So but I'm writing a note because I feel like it's going because we did approve it. We just approved it without, it's not that we didn't take action. We did take action. We just said no recommendation. Okay. But I think the idea here is that, it's moving forward but it may get moved backward if we hear the presentation and we're not ready to act on it at governing body. Right? And that there's still time because it could come back for the December meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility that we realize.
Okay. Councilwoman Cassett and then Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thanks. This may not matter. I was wondering if we want to move forward and make sure that it's on the discussion agenda, but it's easy to pull things off. Will there be a PowerPoint of the presentation included in the packet material so we'll be able to see those ahead of time? Okay, then it's fine. I can pull it off consent if I feel the need to pull it off consent then. So I'm not sure it matters where I go. That was my only question.
So just
Okay, Councilwoman Villarreal. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the presentation will be at the beginning of the agenda anyway on November 10th. And then the item for the resolution extension will be, I think, on the, what is it, consent. So we could, pull that off, obviously, to follow up after the presentation. I mean, I think it's important that you all see the presentation. I don't think you'll be like, what is going on? I think it'll actually help you understand what we've been up to. Obviously, if people don't like the direction that we're going, then we don't want to keep doing the work because we spend a lot of time with committee members volunteering their time. So obviously, if there's things that don't give you consternation, then obviously we wouldn't want to keep it going. But I think you'll see that, there's been work that we've done that really has helped to kind of like first gel the group so that we are all on the same page with guiding principles, and then being able to move forward in our working groups that we established, and then deciding like areas that we wanted to consider and review and evaluate. So there's been a lot. And then we've had a lot of presentations that have been given to us. So some of our meetings have only consisted of presentations. So yeah, there's a lot. And then we've had changes. So of our makeup, and, changes with switching out our facilitator who finished her term, and then we got a new facilitator. So all that being said, I think that'll be helpful for you to see that, because we don't want to move forward either and extend the time period if you don't want us to do it. So the one thing I did want to note for adjustments for the FIR is there's in the section that says consequences for not enacting the legislation, there's a sentence that says staff is not aware which duties and responsibilities have been completed to date. And that's incorrect, because Jennifer Fabian actually knew where we were heading in terms of the duties and responsibilities, and then she left. So I'm not sure what staff were referring to on that sentence, but I don't think it's accurate to say that. I don't know how else you want to state that, but I don't think it's accurate, because Jennifer was our staff and she knew which direction we were going. And then the other correction is the FIR, the expenditure narrative. It says the first contract for facilitation for 10,000 was expended in April. That's incorrect. It was expended and completed in June of 2021. And then the current contract for facilitation started up in September. So there's a period of time from June to September that we did not have a facilitator, because we had to wait through the procurement process and scope of work stuff. So I just want to make that clear, so you all know this like time period that we had to make adjustments. And so I'd like that corrected. And I think that's it on the FIR.
I see Director Ochoa has popped in. Did you want to respond to that? Did you get that? Or I wonder if this is something you guys should work on offline, just to make sure that it's an accurate reflection of, since I think the FIR is being prepared by people who haven't been staffing the committee, to your point, because Jennifer was. That way we'll make sure that nothing gets lost in translation. I'm sorry, Councilor Rivera, you were starting to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say on that point, just like this committee hasn't had a staff person assigned to it, we were in a time frame where we were under those same circumstances, with really her being the only staff person that really knew and understood what we were doing. So losing her was big, just like for this committee. So I'm sure everyone's aware of that, but just wanted to make that point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so Councilwoman Villarreal, you'll talk to Kira about, Director Ochoa, about what needs to be fixed to make it accurate FIR. Great. All right, other questions, other comments? Do we want to move this forward without recommendation again?
Yeah, I'll move forward without recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Can we get a roll call, please, on the motion to move this bill without recommendation?
Councilwoman Cassett,
Yes.
Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
Councilor Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Rivera,
Let's just move on.
okay. Chair Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Counselor Rivera, did you want to vote on this motion for no recommendation?
Is it moving forward without a recommendation?
Right, just
So,
like at finance.
and I assume that will get it onto the city
Well,
council meeting?
Yeah, we seem to have a difference of opinion, but I'm gonna ask the city attorney's office where we stand on this to get clarification. And Jesse's got his hand up again, so maybe he's gonna help us. Jesse.
Thank you, Madam Chair, councilors. So the exact wording in the procedural rules is approved for recommendation. I think that I texted you that. So no recommendation, I don't think qualifies as approval. So if this is intended to go on next week's agenda, then it will need something other than a no recommendation.
All right, but I think the motion and the second was for no recommendation. And Councilor Rivera, when they called your name, you weren't on your Zoom box. So I was just giving you a chance to say yes if you wanted to.
I want to make sure it gets on council, and according to what Jesse just said, there may be some question as to whether that happens or not. So I'll have to vote no on that.
Okay. All right.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
and I mean, I'm a bit concerned because I voted on the pretense that it would go to council. So I mean, that would change my vote.
Well, I think we have, I think we think we're moving it forward without recommendation. But there seems Jesse's raising a question about whether that's what we're really doing, but I think that's what we think we're doing. And we have a motion and a second. We voted, unless you, I don't know how we back out of this.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if the city attorney who's not here tonight concurs with Jesse's recommendation, then we're in a predicament where it's not moving forward.
Well, except we're not really, because we still have December, right? So we can hear the presentation in November, and then we can come back to the resolution in committee at governing body, I think, right?
That's kind of going about it in a sneaky way, in my opinion, but Councilwoman Cassett has a question.
Yes, she does.
Well,
Councilwoman
the wording of my motion was move forward without recommendation. So that was in the motion, was to move it. So that's, I feel like if we said no recommendation, then that's different. But if the word says move forward, that we just voted to move it forward.
Yeah.
I mean, it was part of the motion. That's why
Again, that would be my argument. We think we're moving it forward without recommendation. I think we do have a question longer term. Councilor Cassidy, your hand's still up.
I apologize.
All right, we have Jesse popping back in again. Hi, Jesse.
Okay, last time. Thank you, Madam Chair and councilors. So let me just read directly from the procedural rules, and then you can make of it what you will. No item shall be placed on the agenda unless it has gone through the committee review process and been recommended for approval by at least one city committee. So I will leave you with that.
There's more to that, though. Keep reading the rest of the sentence. Sorry, jumped in.
Well, as it applies to this committee, it doesn't, but unless otherwise approved by a majority vote of the entire governing body, or in accordance with A3 of these rules, which is emergency issues. So you could vote to approve it or to get it on the agenda at governing body, which just means it would be on the December agenda also.
But see, I guess where I get confused is we're saying we're approving it without recommendation.
I'll leave you with what the governing body rules say, and you can make that determination. And then we can talk to Aaron about it later.
Well, I mean, my argument would be that we're saying we're putting it on the agenda. That is clearly our intent. without recommendation because we don't know, we haven't seen this presentation yet. And I think there is a larger issue which we need to clarify, but I think our intent tonight is to move this forward without recommendation.
And excuse me, Madam Chair,
Yes.
based on the last sentence that Jesse read, do we not constitute a majority of the governing body? There are 5 of us.
Yeah, here's another thing we can do. If you really want to, we could, somebody who voted in the majority could move to reconsider. And we could pass it on and then restate the motion.
I'd like to move to reconsider. Revote, basically.
All right, is there a second to reconsider?
Second.
All right, so we have a motion to reconsider. We have a second. We now need to take a vote on reconsidering the motion that just passed, moving this forward without recommendation. If we could get a roll call on that.
Councilwoman Cassett,
Yes, sure.
Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
Councilor Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Rivera,
Yes.
Chair Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, now we have Councilwoman Cassett's hand up.
So I understand we're about to pass this, and I get that we have to do it to put it on the agenda, but I really don't feel great about having to pass something that I haven't received all the information for. So I'm struggling here, and it's and I understand that part of it's some of our procedural rules, but you know, I understand to move the process forward. I will go ahead and vote yes, just in that sense, but I'm not pleased with having to make that vote. And I think it is something that we need to look at with our procedural rules as well. So just a note to selves, that something for us to consider. And just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you.
Okay, we still need a new motion.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'll make a motion for approval with the understanding that it may come back through the committee process. I will say that, but just want to get it on the council agenda. So move for approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for approval of this bill. Can we get a roll call on that, please?
Councilwoman Cassett,
Yes.
Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
Councilor Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Rivera,
Yes.
Chair Councilwoman Romero Worth.
No.
Motion passes.
Okay. I think we got us untangled from that mess. Sorry, everybody. All right, we are on to item 7A, which is a request for approval of a software contract. Sorry, PrimeGov, in the total amount of $354,755.98 for a comprehensive and integrated software platform for Santa Fe Fire Department in fiscal 22, 23, 24, and 25. And we have Andres Mercado, yes? Here for this.
Yes, Councilwoman.
Great. Do we have questions on this item? Is there a presentation? I'm not sure why this was put on discussion here. I think it was on consent at the last meeting, so I don't know why it got put here. Again, we're having a variety of issues that we need to address going forward. But if there's no presentation, are there questions? And if there are no questions, is there a motion? Councilwoman Villarreal. and then Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to say this was a very comprehensive proposal. It was very detailed. So it sounds like you all are getting what you need for this contract. And I was just curious, because I read through the RFP, there was a section that talked about desirable features that you were hoping to get through in the RFP. And I was just curious if you all were able to get, I think there was one area that was ability to connect to the land use building permits and access to the International Fire Code and other features. And I was just curious because that was like a desirable, it wasn't the required. And I was just curious if you all were able to get that in the selected company.
Chairwoman, Councilor Villarreal, the interface between EnerGov and Image Trend would require some discovery to determine whether that's in the cards, but it would not be included in this scope of work. So that would require discovery and then pricing. As far as the International Building Code and International Fire Code, the interface is part of the scope of work of the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Mercado. And I don't know if Director Gonzalez had anything to share because he just popped on. We can't hear you for some reason. No. How weird. Because it doesn't show that you're muted. Oh, wait. No, that's so strange. We can't hear you. That's okay. I just was curious because I think overall the requirements that you all asked for, I'm assuming that all of those required features and deliverables were part of the firm's contract, and then those desirable features may be implemented later on. Is that what I'm hearing?
Chairwoman and Councilor Villarreal, the RFP had desirable and mandatory. The contract does not. So the contract does not talk about desirables. It's only the contractual language. So that's in pages, it's an extremely long document. The work is in pages 202 through 205 of that document. And it is not broken down into mandatory and desirable. So we have identified what exactly the deliverables are that we wanted, that we required from them based on the best and final offer and all the contract negotiations and what was reasonable.
Great. And thank you. And Director Gonzalez, can we hear you now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I apologize about the technical difficulties tonight. IT will work with the city clerk to make sure this doesn't happen again. But on your question on the interface between this platform and EnerGov, that's dependent on building out APIs. Once we get this platform live, we'll build out application program interfaces so it does communicate with EnerGov. We'll also be looking for this platform to communicate with FinMunis also, once we get the upgrade in FinMunis.
Great. Yeah, I think all of that stuff you all know best. I was just pleased to see there's a lot this new system will do to help connect all the various parts of the fire department. So I'm happy to see this, and it'll probably make all of your jobs a lot easier. So
yes.
With that.
And Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, this platform does fall into our ERP initiative.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, I'll yield the floor before I make a motion. If anyone else has any questions.
Other questions from the committee? Sorry, Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering if there was a fiscal impact report that anybody saw in here. And if anyone can point me to it.
Chairwoman, Councilor Rivera, there's not a fiscal impact report. The compensation sheet is in pages 218 through 220 of the document.
Right. So I'm not going to harp on this too bad. We've had documents come up to the governing body that didn't have a fiscal impact report that were sent back. I don't want to see that happen to you. So when a motion's made, I hope that it's made with the recommendation that a fiscal impact report be provided at the governing body meeting, I guess, when it's going to be approved or considered. I think that's probably fine, but just so it's in there so we don't run into any problems.
Understood, and we'll prepare that for the governing body on November 10th.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, other questions from the committee?
Madam Chair, I'll move for approval with the recommendation that this have a fiscal impact report completed before it comes to the governing body for final action.
Second.
Councilwoman Cassidy.
Sorry, I'm just, this is a contract. Do we usually have fiscal impact reports for contracts or just for legislation?
I wondered that myself, whether this.
Yeah,
The
I
stars
think
must be aligned funny tonight. I don't know, like
I know.
something's amiss.
I think
Sorry, I was just
any-
felt
Sorry,
very
Madam
confused.
Yeah, yes, Councilor Rivera.
Yeah, sorry. I think anytime there's, money involved, there's a fiscal impact report, and it's usually, what happens if we don't spend this money? What are the, where's this money coming from? I mean, different things like that. So I just don't want to get to governing body on Wednesday if this is going to be approved on Wednesday and then have it brought up then and then have that be a delay. So just trying to avoid that again.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe the motion could say that if it's appropriate for a fiscal impact. Jesse's here to save us again. Jesse, what do you have to say?
Thank you, Madam Chair and councilors. Fiscal impact reports are only for legislation, so not required for anything else. That doesn't mean that there couldn't be some sort of other document, but a fiscal impact report specifically is only for legislation.
Yeah, because this tells you what the fiscal impact is. It's a contract, right? So it's telling us that we're signing a contract for this amount of money.
But it doesn't really say what happens if we don't spend it. What are the ramifications if we decide not to pass it, which I think the fiscal impact report does talk about it. It gives a little bit idea of what might happen if it doesn't go forward. But it doesn't matter to me. Again, I was just trying to save this from coming back, but if it doesn't need it, then it doesn't need it. So I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay. Do we want to try a new motion?
I
Is the
withdraw my
after
second.
withdraw?
Yeah, we
Withdraw my second.
thank you.
So I would move to approve this contract and if needed, a fiscal impact report or something, sorry, let me take that back. I move to approve this moving forward and I'm just trying to think what
I mean, this money is budgeted, correct?
That is correct. This is in our budget.
Right, so all we're doing is carrying out something that's already been budgeted for by approving the contract. So I don't know that a fiscal impact report, an FIR is the right thing to do. I mean, because it's all here, all 235 pages is telling us exactly if we don't want to do this, then we don't approve the contract, or if we don't, but we've already approved the budget for it.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilor Rivera.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. So you said only legislation requires a fiscal impact report?
Madam Chair, Councilor, that is correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure, Madam Chair.
Okay, so where are we? The motion was what?
Move to approve.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve this contract. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilwoman Cassett,
Yes.
Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
Councilor Rivera,
Yes.
Councilor Garcia,
Yes.
and Chair Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, we will go to presentations now. We have, hold on. Get Prime Gov. We have Julie Sanchez here, our Youth and Family Services Division Director, to talk about the guaranteed income projects in the city of Santa Fe and across New Mexico. And I believe you also have some guests here, Julie. So if you want to introduce them, that'd be great.
I will. Good morning, committee member, or good morning. Good evening, committee members. Good evening, Madam Chair. So I wanted to go ahead and introduce Megan Mead with the Appleseed, New Mexico, who is also going to present. And I'll actually have Megan present first after introducing herself. So go ahead, Megan.
Thanks, Julie. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Happy to be here this evening. My name is Megan Mead. I'm the Director of Law and Policy for New Mexico Appleseed Poverty Advocacy Lab. And Julie, did you want me to just dive into my presentation or okay. So Appleseed, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, we work at the systems level, working with communities to solve complex problems of poverty at the systems and policy level. We do this by weaving together qualitative data from the community with economic analysis and then legal and policy research to design anti-poverty policies. And one of our portfolios of work is focused on family economic stability. And so we've been interested in guaranteed income and cash pilots for a long time now, having seen how challenging it is for families to, how many hoops you have to jump through to access the safety net, to cobble together a safety net that you need. And so when the pandemic started, we received a sizable grant from Western Sky Foundation, and we decided to try 2 cash pilots. So we did them with APS and Las Cruces. Just a little brief background on terminology. We refer to these as conditional cash pilots because the participants did receive, I'll go into this a little bit more, but they did receive monetary compensation, but there were certain conditions they had to meet. And that's different than a guaranteed income program, in which is entirely free of conditions. So we started the pilots with APS and Las Cruces in summer of 2020 in June. And they ran for about 4 months. And the APS pilot was for homeless families experiencing homelessness who had a high school aged youth. And Las Cruces was families experiencing homelessness who had a rising 9th grader. And if the conditions varied a little bit between the 2 different sites, but they did have to attend programming in the summer, and then they had to attend school. The pilots wrapped up in October. So for the first couple months, they had to attend 90% of the time. And then each month they would receive $500. So one of the issues that comes up a lot with cash pilots and guaranteed income programs are you may have heard of the benefits cliff. So when you give somebody money, all of a sudden their other benefits take a nosedive. So to avoid this, we either did directed payments where families would tell us where they wanted the money to go to landlord, utilities. A lot of them were living in motels. Or we did establishment specific gift cards, which, based on our research, seemed like it would be, wouldn't count as income. And that seemed to work fairly well. By the end of the program in Las Cruces, 3 families became stably housed. We don't know how long they were able to maintain that housing stability. And, given the short duration of the program, it was 3 months in Las Cruces and 4 months in APS. There might not be highly durable effects, but that was promising to see. We interviewed so we had 65 participants between the 2 sites, and we interviewed about 40 families, youth, and staff, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. A lot of the youth would would have been working or working more to support their families. So being able to receive money was really helpful. Money to attend school was really helpful. And so that was good to hear. And then moving on, we decided we received a grant from the Kellogg Foundation to do 2 cash pilots with Cuba and West Las Vegas. And these ran from November through July. So they were longer and they were more, I think, comprehensive in what they required. So they were the students had to attend school 90% of the time. They had to complete 90% of their assignments. They had weekly tutoring sessions, and then they connected with a counselor or an outreach worker once a week for a social emotional check-in and just to see how everything was going. And then if the conditions were met, the families received $500 a month. And at first we did the same thing we did with APS and Las Cruces, but that quickly became close to unworkable after the first month or two. So we switched to just checks. So everybody got a $500 a month check if they met the conditions. We did build in, given how chaotic these students' lives were and the trauma that they'd experienced, and certainly last year, how complicated school attendance was, compassionate exceptions. And so these were widely used. Some of the reasons that compassionate exceptions were granted were the unexpected death of loved ones. One participant was a single parent trying to raise a child and finish school, particularly in West Las Vegas and Cuba, but even in APS and Las Cruces, there were connectivity issues. Families in Cuba sometimes had to drive 45 minutes to get a signal to do remote schooling. So that was certainly challenging. There was a lot of older siblings having to take care of younger siblings, students having to work to help support their families. So all these were reasons that exceptions were granted. And something that began coming up as the pilots went on for us was really the ethics of conditionality. So when you're giving people money to help meet their basic needs, should you have any conditions around that? Is that right to impose that? And so we really kind of went back and forth with that over the course of the year. We spoke extensively with school staff and the counselors who were in turn in touch with the families. And we even consulted with national experts. We spoke to an ethicist, and where we landed based upon all the feedback we received is that to the extent you do have any conditions in a cash pilot, conditions requiring school attendance or conditions centered around education are probably the least problematic because of the overwhelming body of evidence of the benefits of education, and sort of having this built-in valve, the compassionate exception, which we really encourage the school staff to use liberally and take into account the totality of the student's circumstances, in which they did. So that's where we landed with that one as the pilots went on. The pilots in Cuba and West Las Vegas, I mean, again, these were small. I think over the course of the year, we had about 53 students that were in the pilots, and we had an 80% retention rate, which is, pretty good given, just how chaotic the lives of these students can be. But I do want to caution, it wasn't a randomized controlled trial, so we can't say causation or anything, but there were some really promising outcomes from this particular pilot. So we had 13 out of 14 seniors graduate on time. Half the students finished the school year with a GPA of 2.5 or higher. When for some quarters, over 50% of students were failing classes throughout the state. So that was nice to see. The students themselves said the tutoring was helpful, and some said they wouldn't have passed the classes without it. One of the things that the counselors and the tutors did that was really helpful is really walking the students through what their work assignments were. So not just helping them with substantive issues, but more of that like organization, executive functioning, here's what's due now, which I think was really helpful for a lot of the youth. The families reported using the extra income to buy food, school supplies, shoes, and pay bills, and everyone said it helped with the monthly budget. And that was actually feedback we got a lot in APS and Las Cruces too. And $500 a month it's not a ton of money, but it really helped just ease the constraints that families were experiencing. And just as a side note, I couldn't believe how many families said buying shoes was a struggle. And that, I mean, so many said, oh, I was able to buy all my kids new shoes. Like, so things like that, that you were like, oh, you know, just how many people are struggling. And then again, the families, we did do in West Las Vegas and Cuba, we also did about 40 exit interviews. And many people said the switch from the gift cards and, you know, we tell you where the money goes to the cash was so much more helpful, particularly in rural areas where an establishment specific gift card. I mean, in Cuba, people had to drive an hour to get to a Walmart, and it just wasn't working. So that was, you know, that was really helpful feedback, and we're glad we were able to make that change. Some of our evolving theories and lessons learned from these pilots, though, is that school staff cannot proxy for families. These 4 pilots, in a way, were really, they're almost, particularly the 2 in APS and Las Cruces, were really designed as almost an emergency response to COVID, where, you know, schools were losing track of kids. Not everybody had a device. We were worried that the school year would start and, you know, a lot of these kids experiencing homelessness wouldn't show up. And so we wanted to help where we could. In West Las Vegas and Cuba, it was the same, but we did not have input from the families on, we had a lot of input on the back end, but not on the front end. So that's something that we really want to do better at in the future, particularly when the pilot, when you're doing a conditional cash program. And then, you know, really considering the ethics of any conditions in any, thinking about that, and again, making sure that the people that the pilot is serving have input on any conditions. We've certainly landed on the idea that cash is best, as opposed to gift cards or, you know, hoops you have to jump through. Just giving people cash and they'll use it to meet their basic needs. And then, you know, certainly we can't work in these places without beginning to see the racist systems and policies that have caused generations of mistrust and inequity that are being perpetuated over and over. And then we really just working with these school districts and the families, like, you know, I think we all just came away in awe of how much of their resilience and their strength. Some of the school staff, I mean, forget the 8-hour workday, they were putting in 16 or 20 hours dealing with kids in crisis. And it was really inspiring and amazing to see. And so we just received a grant in October from the Kellogg Foundation, where we are hoping that we can apply some of these evolving theories and lessons that we've learned from previous 4 pilots. So this grant is to plan and design a guaranteed income program with families that are participating in the CARA program. So this is CARA stands for the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act. And it's a program administered jointly by CYFD and DOH for babies that have had a substance use exposure during pregnancy. It is voluntary, but when there has been a substance use exposure, the baby's offered a plan of care that wraps in the family. And the idea is to support the family, especially the birthing person, to stay clean and be with the baby. And so that's the population we'll be serving with this guaranteed income program. And then on the design team, we do have funding to have 3 to 4 members who have lived experience. So they've either gone through the CAR program, they're in it now, or they have a similar life experience to many CAR participants, to help shape the design process and the pilot. And those folks will be compensated for their expertise. The process will be iterative, so we plan to bring it out to the community at a couple points during the process, and, you know, say, here's where we are. What do you think? Does this make sense? We'll be focusing on Bernalillo and McKinley counties, and so there might be different issues present in both places. So maybe the pilot will need to be tweaked depending on where it's being delivered. And then when thinking about how we evaluate success of these pilots, we really want the community and the people that are participating in the pilot to help us think about what success looks like for them. one of the more well-established guaranteed income programs is in Jackson, Mississippi. I think it's called Magnolia Mothers, and it's for low-income Black mothers. And they have really wonderful materials where they talk about some of the outcomes that the participants see, but it's not something you would find in any administrative data set. It's things like a substantial reduction in mothers requiring predatory lenders to pay their bills, or there was a huge increase of mothers cooking meals at home. And so that's what, that might be what success looks like for those women, and what will success look like for these pilot participants is something else we want to determine. And then, of course, we do want to continue to build the case for legislators and policymakers that that guaranteed income programs are necessary. They work. And so how do we do that? So we're hoping through this design process, we can build a compelling case for that group too. Thank you. That's it for me.
Julie, are you
Yeah, I was
the conductor tonight here?
Huh?
Is there somebody else who's presenting, or do you have more to add?
Yeah, so I was actually going to bring the conversation home to our Santa Fe pilot project. So Jamie, if I can share my screen, that would be great. Jamie?
Do you have access on the bottom of your screen to share?
It says it's disabled participant screen share.
Yeah.
Sorry, Julie, we've had
Okay.
trouble all night.
See if it'll work now.
There we go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the Santa Fe LEAP project, which is the Santa Fe Learn, Earn, and Achieve project, is actually a Mayors for Guaranteed Income project. I am one of the leads. We also have another co-lead who's been working with me the last couple of months to set up and get the project implemented. And then just so you all know, a guaranteed income really is a monthly cash payment given directly to individuals with no strings attached. And there are no work requirements for this funding. A guaranteed income really is meant to supplement rather than replace existing social net, safety social net services, and can be a tool for racial and gender equity. Just to echo what Megan was saying, cash is really powerful, and it's really for these three reasons. For one, it's immediately available. It allows, and then second, it allows for flexibility for different family needs. And three, many people are only partially covered by or completely left out of safety net programs. And so cash really can help fill those gaps to ensure everybody who needs help gets it. And really right now, guaranteed income has been changing lives across the nation. Just some basic information from the Stockton Seed program, which kind of jump-started the MGI project. The residents who received the guaranteed income were 35% more likely to be fully employed after a year. The guaranteed income stabilized household incomes. The guaranteed income allowed families to actually plan for their future, pay off debt, and cover unexpected expenses. The guaranteed income also reduced a sense of scarcity and allowed individuals to make changes with their money, allowing to cover things other than just bills. So participants in this study had reduced levels of anxiety and depression after participating in this study. So Santa Fe LEAP was actually funded by the Mayors for Guaranteed Income. It's providing $400 per month for 12 months to 100 participants. Some of our participants, our parents are primary caregivers of children. They're enrolled in classes at Santa Fe Community College, pursuing a certificate or a degree. And at the time of application, they had to be between 18 and 30. The other qualifying factors, they had to be at below 200% of poverty level. So for a family of 4, that's about $53,000 a year. And so some of our partners in this initiative and this pilot project was really, us here at the Department of Community Health and Safety, the Santa Fe Community College, the Santa Fe Community College Foundation, and then the Santa Fe Community Foundation Expanding Opportunities for Young Families program. And then of course, MGI. And a really important component of being a part of MGI is we have access to the University of Pennsylvania's Center for Guaranteed Income Research, which is actually doing the evaluation for the program. So just to give you all a timeline, since I know you all saw the resolution a few months ago, in January is actually when we applied for and received the funding from MGI. It was an incredibly quick turnaround to get a proposal to them. And, we were incredibly excited when we learned we would be able to be part of the national movement around guaranteed income. From February to May, we finalized the project as well as the research agenda. And I would say that was probably the most time consuming part of the project, including getting our research design through 2 IRBs, one through UPenn and then the other through the community college. And so in August, we opened up applications. UPenn actually drives the application on the back end. And so they're the ones that actually randomly select students. So at no point have we seen the students, know who the students are. It's all under the control of UPenn. From September to October, we worked with our team to do a one-on-one onboarding process. And that team was actually hired by an outside consulting group. So again, we didn't get to meet the students. We didn't get to know the students' names. It was something that's very separate from the city. As of October 15th of this year, our student participants received their first payment of $400, which is incredibly exciting because that's kind of the largest hurdle that we've had to get over. And MGI actually recommended the 15th as a payment date as a best practice, because around that time is usually when folks tend to run low on income and run low on cash. And so continuing this project through September of 2022, students will continue to receive a $400 monthly payment. And then in August through March, UPenn is going to follow the cohort and collect data on how the guaranteed income has actually impacted participants' lives. So just really quick on the research and selection piece, UPenn conducted an IRB approved research study, which included surveys and interviews over the next 18 months. The research agenda, which is proprietary to UPenn, but we were able to put in some of our social determinants of health that we're measuring here through our Connect project and our Connect program. So the research agenda includes health, physical functioning, mental health, stress and coping, as well as hope and mattering, employment and financial security, income volatility, spending and employment. We of course chose an education goal around attaining further higher education, as well as building resilience in education. In terms of families, family dynamics and parenting, since we are looking at a 2-generational household, we're looking at familial stress, parental stress, as well as childcare. And then of course, food and housing security. So our students were randomly selected with the exception of the EOIF cohort. And during the time of application, we received approximately 170 applications and we're only able to, of course, bring on 100 students total. So as part of our onboarding process, we really had to make sure we had personalized benefits counseling. So each student scheduled a meeting with a benefits counselor to review potential impact of guaranteed income on any of their benefits they might be receiving. And this was tailored to folks who were Spanish speaking as well as English speaking. And we really wanted to work with students to make sure that when they consent for this project, if they did have certain benefits, that they would understand that they may be impacted. And so that process was walked through by a trained benefits counselor. We did have 2 websites that were available to students, which were Welcome and Introduction, as well as Facts and How to Receive Their Funding. And again, both of these were accessible in Spanish and English. The handouts and worksheets to walk through the benefits issues, as well as there's a handbook for the project and basic facts, again, both available in Spanish and English. And then our benefits counselors also assisted on helping students open bank accounts and connect their current accounts to make sure they received their monthly payments. And I believe out of the 100 students, we had 7 students who are receiving almost like a Visa debit card that'll be renewed every month because they have issues accessing and getting their bank accounts connected. So really for this project, we're gonna, as our next steps and kind of new ideas around guaranteed income, we want to continue this project and continue the student support throughout this year, but also think about fundraising to either increase the monthly amounts to our cohort or increase, potentially the amount of time that students are able to receive a guaranteed income. We are investigating how to use guaranteed income in different contexts. And so right now we're in preliminary discussions on potential workforce development and career pathways to entice community members into the early child care field, as well as potentially a resource navigation field. We are also targeting stabilizing income and financial stability through a guaranteed income project for those folks most in need through our Connect program, and possibly thinking about using ARPA funds to pilot that. At about 12 months post-project, the city of Santa Fe will receive our preliminary results on the Santa Fe LEAP cohort. And so I really hope that at that time I can bring back, the preliminary data results and outcomes from our pilot project. And of course, collaborate with other projects locally, which includes, Megan's group at New Mexico Appleseed, and then also other MGI projects happening across the nation. And so that's all I have. And so I can stand for questions. Yeah.
Great. Questions, maybe can you stop your share?
Yeah, it was acting up.
Yeah, we've been having trouble all night. Okay, questions from the committee. Councilwoman, I'm sorry, I keep tripping over my tongue. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Megan and Julie, for your presentations. I'm fully supportive of guaranteed income and these initiatives for New Mexico in general. I think they're beneficial, and I like Megan's analysis of how to make these processes easier and ethical and not imposing so many barriers for people to be able to get the support they need to be able to thrive, really, essentially. And I guess I'm just curious a few things about Megan's presentation and their pilots. I was curious about how, since you're kind of launching into this next phase with the Kellogg Foundation, how you all will be, well, let me ask both, because for the pilot projects and even the Kellogg project that you're going to be moving forward with, does that, what's the selection process look like for you all? How did you make selections of the students, and how will you be selecting for this next iteration with the Kellogg project?
Sure. So the students were recruited by school staff for the school pilots, and outreach workers. So it was actually kind of interesting. A lot of families at APS that they asked to participate didn't want to participate. So that, that was something like, we're not sure why, because we weren't doing the recruitment. But there was some trouble with recruitment at APS, kind of the opposite in Las Cruces. More people wanted to do it than we had spaces for. So yeah, that's the answer. School staff did it. For Kellogg, we'll have to determine that during the design process. And this is actually, it's pretty interesting because this grant is actually, it's really only for the planning and design process. We'll hopefully get the guaranteed income portion funded, but that probably won't be for another year or so till we line up another funder. So yeah, that'll be determined. But I think there's hundreds of CARA participants in McKinley and Bernalillo. So unless there was some narrowing of that population, like it's only for young mothers or something, then it would maybe have to be random.
All right. And then just for those pilots with the students, what's the onboarding like? Once they were selected, did they have to go through some questionnaire? Or, what were they required to do?
So we had an informed consent that the families and the youth had to sign that laid out the expectations for all the pilots, and then had some language about, potential harm, mainly that there could be a chance, like in your check-ins, like you talk about something that was hard for you and that could be upsetting. And then I think we may have also mentioned, I'd have to look back, that if you didn't meet the conditions, there might be some months where you didn't get the payment. So that laid it out. Again, the counselors were the ones who, worked directly with the students to have, and the families to have that signed. So that was the main onboarding process. And then with all 4 sites, we did, we had monthly meetings, and we got monthly reports on how it was going. And so we were able to kind of stay on top of anything that came up. And work with the school staff to have as much fidelity to the model as we could have. Mm-hmm.
Great, that's good to know. And just as you're kind of moving forward with this design process, if there's any way we can, I work for NewMexicoWomen.org, and we're a gender justice organization, a women's fund, and we actually fund a lot of organizations that may be helpful in your design process, because once if you support women and create stability, it creates stability for families. So although we don't specifically work on economic security, it does tie into gender justice and healing work that we support in New Mexico. So if there's any way that I can help in that process with connections with community groups, please let me know. Julie, just wanted to follow up with our process. I'm so happy that you took the time to be able to really like dig in and last minute, apply and get all the pieces and partners together. I know that was a lot of work, so I appreciate all that you did with that. And I'm just curious. So what, again, that onboarding part for us, I think from what I heard from community members was problematic. And I actually wish the city was involved more, because University of Pennsylvania and MGI had, from what I heard from community members, very problematic questions about how people would apply and be able to I guess get vetted. And so I'm just curious, like for this evaluation piece, how involved will you all be in their collection of data for UPenn?
So that's a great question, Councilwoman Muriel. Because of the research design, we really cannot be very involved. We have a fellow that's going to be working with our student who's actually from the community. She's a PhD candidate through UNM, who's also bilingual and also a young parent herself. And she's actually going to be the direct contact for the participants and kind of the liaison between them and UPenn. But for the most part, cities at this point have a very neutral touch when it comes to the data collection and the results.
Sorry, I didn't mean to raise my hand again. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to see, I know that you all put in some markers for them to try to pinpoint or be able to collect that data for us, which I think is great. What I'm worried about is that their reporting requirements for the recipients will be, again, what Megan was saying, jumping through hoops, making it more extensive than what we should be doing, because the whole thing is about making things easier for people's lives. And then if they're doing a pilot and they're trying to assess or evaluate by collecting data, which requires people to, whether it's through interviews, I don't know how they're going to do it, but I just want us to caution, be conscious of how these things are structured as we start moving forward and think about what the next iteration is going to be for these programs, because what Megan was saying, it doesn't make sense to be able to put people through this process when it shouldn't be so difficult, especially if it's very invasive and questions that we shouldn't be asking them. So I don't know. I just want to make sure that when we start thinking about the next iteration of this, that we think about the structure, that we're involved with the questions that we ask people about how they get vetted, because we shouldn't be asking questions about religion and anything like that. So, and this is nothing to do with the city. This is just making sure that UPenn and MGI, if we're going to be moving forward with them, how we can be part of that research, because I just want to make sure that the families, it's an easier process for them and they don't have to be being studied, if that makes sense. Nobody should be studied because they have circumstances that aren't the same as other people that have more affluence. So I don't know if you have a really answer to that, but I'm just expressing my concern about that.
And we in working with MGI, one of the things that I want to make sure to let you all know is that when taking the surveys and when asking for time from the participants, they are being compensated. So they will receive additional compensation on top of the general monthly income. So, and then Kira, I don't know if you wanted to add something else to that.
If I may, Madam Chair, Councilman Villarreal, thank you so much for raising that really, really key point. When we submitted our research design to MGI, we actually got told it was the best proposal, but then they promptly changed it radically to conform to their national project. We had some struggles with that, and we were really concerned, and we wanted to honor the partners who had worked with us on the proposal from the Santa Fe Community Foundation. We fought hard to keep them in the original group since they were so key to forming the proposal. That said, I want to explain to this committee too that the agenda of the Mayors for Guaranteed Income is to get a federal guaranteed income policy. And I think to do that, they are sacrificing, frankly, local control in the interest of having a really large N, a really large sample size throughout the country that's very uniform, and that the study is really airtight, as they will have to face questions at the federal level around their programming. So I think that's the rationale. That said, when we Julie presented the last slide, and we're looking at how to use potentially some of our ARPA funding or other funding sources to implement guaranteed income through our Connect program. Of course, during the CARES opportunity, people receive direct cash payments, one-time payments. But we know there are families that, even if those same payments had been spread out over a year, that would really benefit them. And when we do that locally, we can do it with very few strings attached. We don't need to study people like they're specimens, as you say. And we can also really, as Megan alluded to, engage participants early on in the creation of the way that rolls out. So I just want to acknowledge and really thank you for raising that issue, and maybe hopefully provide a little nuance to the whys of that, and the fact that it was beyond our control locally, and we will not have control nationally with the MGI folks, but we can have control with our own funding going forward.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think if we have more local control, it'll make it less invasive for people and community, because really that national, whatever their research design is, it's kind of sacrificing community members and their privacy. I just thought it was strange the way they kind of set up their design model. But I think when we move forward, especially with ARPA funds, it'll make it a lot easier for families to be able to get the support they need without having to feel like everything about their lives is exposed. So I think Megan probably alluded to that too with some of the projects that you all worked on, the pilot projects. So I'm happy that we're doing this, and it'll be interesting to see kind of what the structure will look like and the partnerships will look like in the next year. And hopefully there'll be some other ways to make it more flexible for people and easier to be able to what do you call it, to get approved. So I don't know, Megan, you kind of disappeared for a little bit, but maybe you're back. I don't know if you had any other comments, or based on what I had shared. I don't know if you were able to hear all of what I had just offered to you in terms of information. Or
I apologize, Councilwoman, my internet was going in and out. So I heard most of it, but I did have to shut my video off. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Other questions from the committee? Doesn't look that way. Thank you for coming and talking about these different projects, exploring this idea, and giving us an update, particularly about what's happening here in Santa Fe with the partnership with the community college. I've been wondering about that, so it's great to hear what's going on. And thank you to our guest for being here. And I think that's all we have for you. Trying to get back to my agenda. All right, so that concludes our presentations. We don't have an executive session. Are there matters from staff?
Madam Chair, sorry so late.
Yes.
There's no matters from the Community Development Department.
Okay. Matters from the committee. Matters from the chair. All right, I'm sorry we had kind of a bumpy road tonight. I've already sent a couple of emails to get some clarifications on some things, and we will get the technology piece worked out, and we will try to have smoother sailing at our next meeting. So thank you for your patience tonight. And our next meeting is Wednesday, December 1st. See you soon, sooner than that. We're adjourned.